He's been teaching me dependence. What something's built on has to sustain it. And in seasons prior, I felt like I had built my life on the amount of zeros in my bank account or the amount of security and position I had in the corporate world. And that just wouldn't sustain me long term. And the Lord knew that. So in his kindness, he's really given me the opportunity to step out of the corporate world and into his will and into the journey that he's creating through Storyteller Factory, but honestly, just in my life. And, if you think about dependence, the original design in Eden was for us to be dependent on him. It was for us to need him, to walk with him, to do fruitful work, but with him. And so I think in this season, I'm just learning what it looks like to come back to our original design of being with him and dwelling with him, and just finding Eden here on earth, which I think is just a blessing that we get to do and journey with him. When I was 16, I walked away from the Lord. At that point, I had only gotten the guilt and the shame and the negative effects of religion. And the Lord just really brought that back tenfold to me. I walked away for 6 years. And in that time frame, I probably tried and did just about everything that you can think of to numb. And when I was on my way back to the Lord and he was kind of seeking my heart and running after me, there's been this really beautiful experience of knowing that there was nothing that's left or missed at the altar. And so even though I was 16 when I walked away, I now work with our youth group who are 16-year-olds. And I get to create spaces where they're really allowed to ask questions and be navigating with the Lord these experiences that they're having and these things that they're trying to unravel. And I may not have all the answers. Lord knows I don't, but I at least get to create places where they can ask the questions and I can work with our leaders to find out the answer. Or if they do happen to walk away, well, I want to create a really beautiful place for them to come home to. And that's really important to me. On the flip side, though, with an understanding of what it looks like to numb, I think I know what it looks like to live in vibrancy of life now. And even though when I was living in corporate life, I felt like that was success, there is a vibrancy of life that exists when you're in the will of God and you're building something with him that I would have missed had I stayed in corporate life. And I'm so grateful to have that now. And so I think that knowing what the shoe was like on the other foot, I just can see how much better this side is. And while it's harder, I wouldn't want it any other way. I think that mentorship really is just a safe place to bounce ideas off of. The mentors in my life really showed me that this journey that the Lord was taking me on was the Lord. I think if I wasn't surrounded by entrepreneurs and folks who had maybe made decisions to come out of corporate or to allow the Lord to really tell their story, I just don't think I would have done it. I don't think I would have had the bravery. I don't think I would have had the tools. But I had people in my life telling me, I think you're brave. I think this is what you're meant for. And I was able to go and ask them for confirmation when I was in the tension of trying to figure out what the right choice was. And I think without mentorship, there's just no way I would have done made the choices I've made, or am continuing to make, because entrepreneurship's a daily choice. And on the flip side, though, I think us being really good stewards of overflow, right, is letting rivers continue to pour out of us. And so it would be a disservice if my mentors gave me all of this wisdom and I only kept it for me. And so I'm really passionate about sharing that wisdom with people that are around me. Some of my favorite moments in the last few months have been meeting with the youth kids and talking to them about their business ideas. Like, how wild that at 16, 17, they have these ideas that I'm like, okay, you could do this. These are the questions I would ask. These are some of the data points I would figure out. And I think it's us being really beautiful stewards of the kingdom when we allow the river to not just come to us, but come through us. And I just am so grateful for the opportunity to do that. But I think mentorship, discipleship, it's a biblical foundation. It's a way of life that we should all be living by. And so I'm really grateful to have it in my life, but also to pour it out from my life. There are moments it's hard. I think when you're creating something that there isn't a blueprint for, It's hard. But when you really understand that God wants to do a new thing, I actually feel so honored that he entrusted, I'm really honored that he entrusted that with me. When there isn't a blueprint for the thing that you're trying to create, it's hard. Like, I'm not even going to front, like, we're a marketing agency that doesn't really market ourselves. We really rely on the connections God wants to bring at the coffee shop or at different places that we go. And we rely on his faithfulness. And that's a very hard thing to do, especially when I had this perceived notion of safety in the corporate world and even, being creative. There's risk involved. It's possible that people won't want what you build or what you create, but you have to trust that the Lord is doing something so intentional with you. And it creates a requirement of trust that is stretching for me, if I'm honest, but it's so worth it. I mean, we have stories after stories of people just coming alongside that we never knew and extending the community of people that we're encountering on a daily basis. And I want to build something that does leave a legacy that I can pass off to someone in our youth group, that I can pass off to my family, my kids one day. And I see what God's doing with this story. And I also see what he's been doing with me my whole life, no matter what phase of life I was in. I loved stories. I became an avid reader at 12. I have always loved stories. And if you look at the Bible, it's his preferred way of teaching. And so I see what he's doing and know the way he's making me more in his image, to love and appreciate stories and to be one that tells them. And so I'm just actually grateful to build something that hasn't been done. There are days it's really, really hard, but it's the greatest honor of my life. I think that I had this perceived notion of what success looked like and what people's expectations of me were, and that it was my responsibility to fulfill those. Success is not having a specific car, having a specific amount of zeros in your bank account, having even the house that you want. To me, living a successful life is creating environments where God's will happens. And I think that that's been the heart shift for me, because before, even though I was saying I was a Christian, and I was, but there was only an extent of understanding I had for the Lord because of the fact that my safety was somewhere else. And so in this season of change, where my safety is becoming him, it's really changed how I show up everywhere. It's changed how I show up with my friends. I'm no longer trying to say I have to do this for them because I want to be this kind of friend for them. Or I'm no longer showing up at church saying I have to serve so I look like, I'm this kind of person or this kind of advocate for this place. No, it's out of an overflow that I'm now showing up in these places and serving. And with that, I think it's changed how I see me. I look in the mirror and I see somebody who the Lord did entrust, instead of someone who's trying to fight to be worthy to be entrusted. And I think that that's just a different heart posture. It's a different confidence level. And I don't think it would have been possible had I had my safety and all these other things. And in his kindness, he's been pruning that away. I think proximity is everything. I mean, the reason he's the good shepherd is because we are required to be in proximity to hear his voice. And I think that one of the things the Lord told me really on the front of this, because having the Lord become your safety and removing these perceived notions of safety, that's devastating. Let me just be honest. It was painful. But I remember very specifically sitting in a worship night and him saying to me, "I'm not a hired hand. I am your shepherd. I'm not a hired hand. I'm not doing this because I'm being paid to do it or I'm a fill-in for the position. No, I am your shepherd." And I think when you think about proximity, it comes back to that truth. He is our shepherd. He is our father. And out of that, I want to have a fear of the Lord that's a fear of being away from him, because I don't want to be removed from your hand of protection. I don't want to be removed from your hand of provision or peace. And I'm actually terrified to be away from that. And so I think that that's honestly what I'm learning with proximity is within that container, there's so much safety and beauty. Why would I want to go away from it? If you look at the Bible, I mean, when God's doing something big, it's always for people. It's always for people's hearts. I mean, one of the things, Ruth, that you even say is that like gold is pavement to him. And I think that that's, a revelation that comes from really understanding the Father's heart for his people. He wants to dwell with his people. In Revelations, it talks about and then he could dwell with his people. He wants to come back to the original design of dwelling with the ones he loves most, which is his people. And so I think when you have that heart posture, everything else starts to look different. I mean, money seems like tools, and it is. And time is just a tool, and even knowledge is just a tool, because ultimately, those are just elements that we can play off of to get to build the journey or build the thing that he's asking us to build. It's not the end goal. And when you really recognize that God will always dwell for the good of his people, God will always want for the good of his people, I think your goal and what you set your heart on just looks different. And he told me that from the jump. I mean, one of the reasons I left corporate life was because I saw how they were dealing with people. And irregardless of whether or not they understood Jesus or the extent that he loved them, they were still God's people. And so it actually hurt my heart. And it's one of the massive reasons I left corporate life, was because they weren't treating people well. And so it's been a life goal of mine to make sure that not only do we treat people well within our organization, but how do we treat people well outside? Am I the same person sitting in front of my best friend that I am in front of a youth, that I am in front of my team? And the contexts are different, obviously, but am I? And I think that that's a really hard question for us to answer, but are you the same person? And that's really my goal. – 100%. I asked one of my mentors that exact question a few weeks ago. I looked at him, and he's seen a significant amount of success, but he has a really wild story of how he got there. And I remember asking him, is it worth it? And he said, absolutely it is. And the only thing that I wish that I had done differently was spend less time worrying of whether or not God was going to provide, or in these places where the tension and the pressure were so high. And after that conversation, something shifted in my heart. And I'm really intentionally trying to spend less time worrying about what it's going to look like tomorrow, what it's going to look like in 3 years, what it's going to look like in 5. I'm a natural planner by nature, and the Lord knows that. But it's 100% worth it, but it's worth it for today. And if I keep thinking about what it's worth for what it's going to be worth in 3 years, I'm going to miss the gift that it is today. And so I've tried really intentionally the last few weeks and the last month or so to be present in the day, because I want it to be worth it every single day. Not just the days when we're standing on stages, not just the days when there's infinite numbers of zeros in our bank account, but it's worth it today too. My favorite story in the Bible is the story of the Israelites actually crossing over the Jordan into the Promised Land. And the reason that's my favorite is because the day I got baptized is actually the day our pastor spoke about it. But one of my favorite things he said about it was, one, the Israelites had to, Joshua had to, in this story it's found in Joshua, but Joshua had to step into the water. And I think that it's really cool because with Moses, he just got to put the staff in the water and it separated, right? But Joshua had to step in. He had to do something. He had to execute something he'd seen before, but was being executed differently. And on the flip side, when they did step in, it was only when the Ark of the Covenant entered the water that it was split. And so I think that when you think about the Ark of the Covenant, we're often going into places we've never seen before, that we've never seen doing things that we've never seen executed before. At least that's my life right now. And so that story is just such encouragement for me. And in the middle of the river, they put stones in the middle of the river. And I remember our pastor saying to me, why do you think they did that? And his belief system was that when the river got low, they would have physical evidence of what Jesus did. And so one of the things that's constant for me is, God, build my faith stones in the middle of the river so that when it gets low, because inevitably it will. There's pruning, there's hard seasons, We don't get a perfect walk. We don't get a perfect journey. That's never been promised to us. And so my plea to Jesus is, God, let there be faith stones in the middle of the river so that when it gets low, I know the work that you've done. I can point to it. And it allows me to propel into the promised land. It allows me to propel into the thing that you've asked and promised that you will provide for me. And so it's been just a mile marker in my life. Joshua as a book has been a mile marker in my life and probably will continue. I'll probably unravel the mysteries of that book for the rest of my life. But if you need encouragement, if you're in a transition season, Joshua is your book. Be brave. You're braver than you think. You're stronger than you can even imagine. It's not going to look like what you think, but it's going to be better. And it's worth it. She was so scared. She really was. She was terrified to leave the corporate world. She was terrified to trust Jesus because she was scared he was going to let her down. And he hasn't, and he won't, is what I would tell her.